Et je vous charge, vous, Desmond Hart, en qualité de nouveau Bashar.
When we first heard that HBO was making a show about the early days of the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, we were intrigued by the direction they would end up taking. But we didn't expect to get hooked to the show because of a soldier who now claims to be the prophet of God. It's a testament to Travis Fimmell's acting skills because Desmond Hart has become one of the best sci-fi characters in recent memory. His borderline crazy act would have been off-putting if he didn't have the skills to pay the bills and couldn't put his money where his mouth was. Turns out he has both of those things and then some, and it's all connected to his origin story. So, in this video, we'll take a look at Desmond Hart's life and break down how his very existence becomes the basis for universal change 10 millennia down the line. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means an awful lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A wandering soldier from planet Balut. Desmond Hart's introduction to Dune prophecy. The man we know as Desmond Hart is introduced as one of the best soldiers that the Imperium has to offer. Prophecy is set 10,000 years before the birth of Paul Atreides, and at this time, Arrakis was not being governed by House Harkonnen under a Chom contract from the Emperor. It was Imperial territory, and the family most likely to receive it as ducal territory was House Rachis. Rachis was one of those planets that didn't quite agree with the tenets of the Butlerian Jihad. During the 10,000 years of the Carino Empire, Rachis and Ix produced technology that skirted its artificial intelligence ban more than once, and, in the main story, Ix eventually overtook Rachis as the main machine manufacturers of the Imperium. But in prophecy, Rachis is clearly ahead of Ix because it's in position to take control of the Golden Lion throne. Emperor Javico Corino is introduced to the series in the middle of a dowry negotiation with Duke Ferdinand Rachis. In exchange for a fleet of fighters, he would be taking his son Pruitt as Princess Inez Corino's imperial consort. If this plan had gone through, House Rachis would eventually come to rule over the Imperium, and perhaps the age of thinking machines would have returned as well. Episode 1 makes it perfectly clear what their position is in regards to such technology. Duke Rachis thinks that the Imperium has become far too strict about such things. Given the indecisive impotence of Emperor Javico, if the Duke was given enough time and free rein, perhaps he would have succeeded in bringing the AI back. But that's where Desmond Hart figures in. Desmond's first scene shows him approaching the Imperial Palace with a swatch of black cloth that he stuffs in his pocket. We don't know it at the time, but this piece of cloth belongs to a Bene Gesserit sister's robes, which means that he was planning to go after the sisterhood from the very beginning. Desmond is one of the most decorated and distinguished soldiers of the Imperium for a reason. Most soldiers don't even survive one tour of Arrakis. Ever since spice was introduced to the Imperium by Tuck Kedair and Venki Enterprises, a group of Fremen had been trying their damnedest to protect it. This group, led by the legendary Salim Wormrider around Tuk's time, eventually became a local resistance fighter against spice harvesting, and many of the Imperial troops sent to the desert world would discover their lethal fighting skills at the cost of their lives. Desmond was impressive because he survived the Fremen not once or twice, but 12 times, which puts his battle prowess at the level of the Swordsmasters of Ginaz. A showdown between him and Kieran Atreides would serve as a fitting callback to Paul and Feyd-Rautha's duel from the end of Dune Part 2, but that's not the point here. Desmond might have the skill of a Ginaz swordmaster, but he wasn't a swordmaster himself. He claimed to come from the planet Balut, which has conditions among the worst in the Imperium. Before the Butlerian Jihad, Balut was a site for Tlulaxa organ harvesting operations, which left most of its population dead or enslaved. Even after the Tlulaxa were driven from their lands, Balut was decimated by the Omnius Scourge before the Battle of Corran, making it a living nightmare thereafter. Desmond survived amongst scavengers who fought slavers and deadly disease at every turn, and it would make him a top-tier fighter, because in Dune, environments shape people as much as people shape environments. War was the only life he'd ever known, so becoming an Imperial soldier seemed like a logical choice to him. Desmond must have spent some time working alongside Kieran Atreides as well, because it's the latter that introduces his return to the Imperial Palace. Emperor Javico is very interested in hearing the tale that Desmond has to tell, because according to the reports he'd received, Hart's entire unit was wiped out in a Fremen worm attack. Their spice harvesters, soldiers, everything had been destroyed, but Desmond tells him that the attack wasn't Fremen. He reveals that his unit was ambushed by insurgents who employed the same battle tactics as Javiko's Imperial soldiers, and this is revealed to be true when we learn that Kieran Atreides is part of the insurgency. Everything he says from this moment forward is the naked truth, but Dune is a franchise that uses even truth to deceive. When Desmond is making his report, Reverend Mother Kasha Jinjo uses truth sense on him and tries to decipher whether he's lying. But, of course, he's not. In turn, he shoots her a look that says, "I know what you're up to, witch," and turns out he does. The prophecy of Shai-Hulud that burns infidels alive. Desmond's professed purpose. Beginning with the second episode of Prophecy, we start to realize that Desmond Hart might just be a prophet-type figure like Paul Atreides because he seemingly possesses the power of prescience. He's able to see through the Sisterhood's manipulation of the Emperor, and using choice words and actions, he manages to alienate them from him. When Valia Harkonnen interrogates him, he says that Shai-Hulud took his eye to give him the power to see where even she could not. He saw the corruption in Kasha's heart, which is why he killed her using his God-given power. He also sees the blood that trails Valia's every step. Desmond Hart is clearly aware of the long game that the Bene Gesserit are playing with their Imperial employers, and much like Paul 10,000 years after him, he wishes to break their power instead of succumbing to it. Before he kills Pruitt Rachezi as a part of his plan to oust the Bene Gesserit, he says that the thinking machines controlled humanity's thinking and its very existence was threatened by it. Now the machines were gone, and yet humans were still being controlled by a power that had made itself indispensable. When he suggests to Javiko that he get rid of all the Bene Gesserit truthsayers within the Imperium, Javiko replies by telling him he might as well admit his complicity in Pruitt's murder. The Sisterhood used its position as truthsayers to become part of the political fabric of the Imperium, because without them, no great house would be able to distinguish a truthful person from a liar. Ironic considering they bend the truth to suit their needs the most, and this is something Desmond Hart knows all too well. The fact that he walked into the Imperial Palace with that piece of cloth means he was aware of the Sisterhood's connection to the insurgency. Now he needed proof. Over the course of the next 2 episodes, he works alongside the Empress to seek out traitors, insurgents, and machine sympathizers within the capital. It's Natalia who gives him the names of suspected rebels, who names him Shai-Hulud's prophet, who seeks to control his power for the glory of House Corrino. In episode 5, when he survives yet another attack that should have killed him, Natalia says that each man must face his own conscience and his own testing, but Shai-Hulud makes the final choice. Earlier in the series, Javiko described religion as his wife's refuge, and it looks like he was right. Natalia seems to be a part of some sort of religious group that worships the worm as a god, much like the Fremen do, but that's a mystery for another time. What's relevant here is the fact that she sees him as a prophet, and she empowers him through that same lens. Her information leads him to Kieran's insurgent friends, Duri and Horus. Desmond executes them viciously in the throne room of the Imperial Palace, while dazzling the crowd with his story about Shai-Hulud's protection and destruction. He says that the very planet called Arrakis tries to kill you the moment you step foot on it, from its fauna to the Fremen. But when the sandworm appears, the bugs and critters clear away, and even the desert demons let you live another day. He then has the same prophetic vision that Mother Rakella had in the first episode, and that the Acolytes have in episode 4. This, to us, is the ultimate admission that he is connected to the Tir'in Arafel prophecy and the Sisterhood's prescience at large. In this series, the Bene Gesserit don't understand their own powers fully. They think of their prescient visions as nightmares, and it takes Lila being possessed by Rakella to clear up the confusion. If every sister sees Shai-Hulud and those mysterious blue eyes in their vision, then surely Desmond seeing them too makes him connected to them. He might not be leading millions of Fremen to a holy war to obtain paradise, but he is leading a group of elite soldiers to cleanse the Imperium of rebels and traitors. His professed aim is to empower House Corrino and make the Imperium a better place for all that live within it, but his actions feel a little bit more personal. Desmond doesn't really care about the thinking machines making a return. In episode 5, we see him hand a thinking machine to Harrow Harkonnen, and we still haven't gotten an explanation for what he did with Pruitt Rachezi's AI lizard toy. Desmond uses the context planted within the society of his time to manipulate events in such a way that he can rid it of the sisterhood, because that's his real goal. He takes on the trappings of a prophet or a messiah to do so, and in that, he's just like Paul from the books. Movie Paul is a bit more of a white meat babyface, but we won't get into that in this video. What we will get into is the reason behind his hatred for the sisters. When episode 1 was over, we thought it was because he'd figured out that they were involved in the attempt on his life. Wanting to kill those who tried killing you is a basic yet powerful motivator for the kind of things Desmond has done so far. Him being a soldier makes it even more sensible because in desert warfare, you either kill or get killed. There's no surrendering. But when his genetic makeup was finally unraveled at the end of episode 5, everything that felt mysterious about Desmond Hart suddenly made a lot of sense. His powers, his purpose, but especially his pedigree. The long-lost son of Tula and Ori. How Desmond is connected to Paul Atreides. The final scenes of episode 5 reveal the true motivation behind Desmond Hart's actions. Revenge against a mother who abandoned him. Since episode 1, the biggest question that the Sisterhood's been grappling with is what exactly is Desmond Hart's true identity. They had collected genetic samples from every single family of consequence across recent human history, and they had no clue with regards to who he might be. When Desmond executed Horus and the rest of the conspirators in the throne room, he bled, and this allowed Valia to collect a genetic sample. She sent it to Tula for answers, but instead, what she got were more questions because it revealed her sister's ultimate betrayal. Dune Prophecy follows the events of the Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson expanded Duneverse, but it takes several creative liberties with it. For starters, it is set well after the events of Sisterhood of Dune, which is supposedly its primary inspiration. Valia and Tula both exist well after the incorporation of the Spacing Guild and are far older than they were when Brian and Kevin stopped writing about them. In the novels, Tula goes through with the Atreides massacre, leaving only Willem Atreides alive to restart the dynasty. It isn't until she and her sister battle Willem and Vorian Atreides on the planet Corran that Valia discovers her sister's treachery. In the TV show, Valia is clearly the one Harkonnen who despises the Atreides the most, but Tula isn't far behind. Her execution of Ori after consummating their love was one of the most brutal scenes in the entire Dune franchise, even though it was largely bloodless. The show initially made Tula seem like a person who killed her own emotions so long as it satisfied her sister's plans. But when she couldn't let go of Lila, we knew that the showrunners had retained her empathetic qualities from the novels. They were just waiting for the right moment to reveal its devastating impact. The Bene Gesserit are trained to use emotion as a weapon, never to succumb to it. Lady Jessica ruined the entire Kwisatz Haderach program by giving Duke Leto a son instead of a daughter, thanks to sentiment. And the reason the Sisterhood despised love especially was likely because of what Tula did to protect her child. In Navigators of Dune, she and her sister fight the last two Atreides of import in their generation, but they both start losing the fight. Tula ends up getting cornered and nearly killed by Willem Atreides, and only the revelation of her own child spares her life. She isn't spared from harsh disciplinary action by his sister for this betrayal, and we see something similar in the show, but the consequences of her treachery are far more dire this time. Instead of discovering Desmond's survival as an infant, Valia learns about it after he's reached adulthood and unlocked his prescient mind. She wanted to exterminate House Atreides and was going to offer up Kieran with disturbing glee in order to do it, but now her greatest enemy is her nephew, and grappling with that reality sends Valia into a bigger tailspin than we'd imagined her capable of. She might have spared Desmond and told Tula to do what she desires with him, but then she headed straight to Arrakis, and we all know nothing good ever comes out of people relocating to Arrakis. While Tula is being haunted by the past that she wished fervently wouldn't catch up with her, Desmond himself is prepared to meet his mother with fire and sword. When Empress Natalia asks him the all-important question, why he does what he does, he tells her that his mother, who left him with scavengers to survive by fighting for scraps, was a sister. Natalia understands then that he wants revenge, and seeing as it lines up with her own goal, she kisses him and buys his loyalty for herself. Now she's presented him with his heart's desire, the woman who abandoned him, imprisoned and chained. All this is well and good when it comes to expanding Desmond's origins, but how does it explain his connection to Paul? Well, apart from being the first Atreides Harkonnen production, he also appears to be the Proto Kwisatz Haderach. We've gone into detail on this topic in our video titled How Dune Prophecy Creates the Kwisatz Haderach Program through Desmond Hart, so we suggest you check it out for the relevant information. But we will boil it down to this. The fact that Desmond is a prescient, twice-born Harkonnen Atreides is no coincidence. It is the seed that germinates into the breeding program that births Paul. We're sure that with everything that's happened in the finale, Valia will recognize the fact that she's been interpreting everything from the wrong lens, and that key to the reckoning shouldn't be destroyed, it should be controlled. That control will come through millennia of careful, selective breeding, which will result in another Harkonnen Atreides, only this time, the child would be under Sisterhood control. Eventually, they'll place him on the Golden Lion throne like they wish to do with Inez in Prophecy, so the framework has been laid down rather explicitly by the show. We can imagine seeing a moment in Villeneuve's third Dune film where Desmond shows up in one of Paul's visions, because he's not just the first version of him, he's also his ancestor. But now that we've answered how the great mystery behind Desmond's identity shapes the story of Prophecy and the larger Duneverse, let us now touch upon the final aspect of his enigma, his powers. When we saw him burn Pruitt Rachezi and Kasha Jinjo at the same time across two different parts of the galaxy, we knew that whatever power he was using couldn't stem from regular Bene Gesserit training. The Sisterhood in the main timeline doesn't possess psychic powers. They give the illusion of possessing psychic powers with their advanced mental capacity, which allows them to accurately decipher a person's intent down to the most trivial motivation, but this is a cultivated skill. They can also control their own biochemistry down to the last molecule, but they can't extend this effect beyond their bodies, which is what it felt like Desmond was doing. The initial analysis of Kasha's body revealed that her meridian system had been tampered with and her amygdala had been burnt to hell. This suggested that Desmond used his powers to change Kasha's internal biochemistry, and indeed, it looks like that's exactly what he does when he starts hissing. His power makes the veins in his target's bodies press against their skin while they cook from the inside out. It's an increase in body temperature that goes beyond imagination, as you can see from this guy's grills getting cooked out of his mouth in episode 4. But is it an entirely organic power? We had our doubts, and those doubts have been strengthened by the revelation that the effects of his power resemble the Omnious Scourge, which ravaged the universe during the Great Machine Wars. This, combined with his elusive access to machine technology and his supposedly different eyes, made it seem like he's a pawn of the machine conspiracy, and the finale pretty much confirms it. He's working against House Rachezi and the Ixians on the outside, but on the inside, he might as well be working to advance their cause. Desmond has a virus deployment system embedded within his eye, as was revealed in the finale. A thinking machine put it there, but we don't know as yet who directed that machine. His hissing and temple touching always seemed like activation methods more than anything else, and now we know that that's what they are. Desmond Hart could be an Ixian machine or a Tleilaxu face dancer with advanced biogenetic capabilities, because his rebirth sounds a lot like a Gola's memory recollection process. But the thing we're the most relieved about, more than anything else, is that Desmond's power isn't a remnant of the Sisterhood's abilities from when they inhabited Rossack, or it would have had dreadful consequences if that proved to be true. Before the Sisterhood became the Bene Gesserit, their existence as sorceresses was verified by their psychic abilities. Using the power of their mind, they could pretty much manipulate the physiology of any organic being in their vicinity and burn them alive, just like Desmond does. You'd think that this is totally unrelated from Raquel's findings in episode 5, but we would urge you to think again. The Omnious Scourge, like any other retrovirus, didn't die out after being spread in its initial stage. On the planet Rossack, which was an incubator for all sorts of lethal diseases, it mutated and evolved into the Rossack epidemic, which was far worse than the Scourge. The Rossack epidemic was only dealt with after Raquel Oberto Anarul used obscure resources from the jungles and her own biochemistry to produce an antidote, but that was in the novels. In the show, they referenced this when Suck Dr. Nazir tried neutralizing the virus by using Prana Bindu techniques, but ended up dying instead. Desmond's using machine technology to spread this evolved virus instead of his mind, but the real question is who put it there. It's clear that the virus proliferates from micro-devices implanted within his right eye. The Ixians, House Rachezi, and the thinking machine Erasmus come to mind immediately. Erasmus is an especially choice candidate because in the extended Dune universe, he somehow managed to survive the Great Machine Wars. The Tleilaxu could have done it, They have used similar methods to deploy biogenetic weapons in the novels. None of the Bene Gesserit that exist in this time period have such abilities, so it's clearly not them. So, if we can figure out the secret behind who gave Desmond his power, we can figure out whether he's really on humanity's side or not. His blood says that he is, but his actions don't. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the true mystery of Desmond Hart's identity. It's not his shocking Harkonnen Atreides origin, it's the secret to his survival in the desert. Who saved him from it? Why did they put the virus pods in his eye? Regardless of what that might be, we can say with utmost confidence that he is the reason Paul Atreides was created by the Sisterhood, and perhaps they should have just taken a beat and not done that, especially after all the chaos Desmond has created. Marvelous verdict! And speaking of chaos, we don't want a riot on our hands, but this is about as far as we can go with this video. Desmond Hart is the reason we've continued watching Prophecy for as long as we have, and uncovering his origins and how they relate to the main timeline was a true pleasure for us. Now, you guys know what we think about him, but we'd like to know what you think about this video. Do you agree with our assessment of his origins, or do you have a different opinion? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more Dune content. We'll see you guys in the next one, and until then, stay safe and don't sniff spice.